I think my past speaks for itself. You can say what you want, but I'm a serial winner. These are some of my favorite words ever said in a press conference. I believe that self-confidence and self-belief are some of the most essential traits someone can have in football. And that day, back in 2018, as Chelsea sat 5th in the table, Antonio Conte showed everyone that he wasn't to be messed around with. But still, today we are asking ourselves, is Antonio Conte really a serial winner? If so, what makes him one? And another that is also a big question these days, why is Antonio Conte joining Tottenham? Is it a statement? Is he that self-confident that he believes he can bring trophies back to a club that hasn't won anything big since the 1980s? I guess we'll see. So sit back, don't forget to click the like button, and of course, enjoy the video. For English fans especially, it is easy to forget that Antonio Conte isn't just a manager. Back before he ever landed in London, Conte was a 16-year-old box-to-box midfielder debuting for Lecce. Despite his father always making sure he studied hard, football was in the family. His father was also a coach, and his brother was also already training with the main squad at only 15 years of age. Despite the early start, a broken tibia at 17 nearly ended his career. But by the time he was back, he asserted himself in the squad, helping them stay in Serie A. And by the age of 22, he would join Juventus. This would be the only transfer of his career. The man who brought him in was Giovanni Trapattoni. Conte would idolize him over his first few years there, referring to him as his second father. Known as the Old Fox, Trapattoni accumulated 23 trophies over his career, including 3 UEFA Cups and a Champions League. All managers admired Conte because he didn't see his career as the end goal. He used his time as a player as an apprenticeship, staying close to his managers and learning about the game as much as he could. His passion for football extended far beyond the 4 lines. He was dedicated to mastering every bit of it, first as a player, then as a leader, and eventually as a coach. Right on his first start for the club in a friendly against Bayern, a misjudged pass by Conte gave away the winning goal. Days after, Conte was still going in circles thinking about his mistake. Trapattoni didn't need to look at him twice before realizing what was happening and saying, "You're still thinking about that? Let it go, you'll be here for years. One mistake doesn't mean anything." Conte would eventually tell the press that those words kept him from potentially leaving Juventus, which sounds odd. Conte acting like a quitter, huh? Just goes to show that you have to train your mind just as much as your body. Conte wasn't born a winner, he shaped himself into one. Still, over the first few years with Trapattoni, AC Milan sat at the top and Juventus kept missing out on success every time it seemed to be in reach, despite having greats like Roberto Baggio in the squad. After 3 seasons, Trapattoni was gone, but Conte would once again have another great to learn from, and so comes Marcello Lippi. If he had learned perseverance and determination from Trapattoni, Lippi provided him with the biggest show of ambition and confidence one could ask for. Just seeing him, he had this aura about him. With a cigar in his mouth and those iconic aviator glasses, Lippi became one of the most iconic managers of all time. And right on that first season, it would show Conte that you don't need a decade to turn a team's fate around. By the end of the first season, Juve won the Serie A and faced Parma in 2 finals. First the UEFA Cup, which Conte missed only to see Juve lose it in his absence, and then the Coppa Italia with Conte back in the squad, which they won 2-0. Despite all this success, Lippi brought much more to Juventus. The following season, despite missing out on retaining the league title, Conte would start being seen as a dressing room leader and Juventus would go on to win the Champions League, defeating Litmanen's Ajax in the final. After all this success, Conte was made captain, being the assigned leader of a team with the likes of Edgar Davids, Zinedine Zidane, Del Piero, Christian Vieri and Didier Deschamps. Unfortunately, an injury ruled him out for the rest of the season, and this time, he would watch from the stands as Juventus lost the Champions League final to Borussia Dortmund. This really stung for Conte, as you might imagine, so the following season he pushed Juventus even harder as they would go on to win the league and make it to yet another final of the Champions League, this time around facing Real Madrid. Strangely, Conte would once again sort of miss the final, only coming in with 13 minutes to play, not having enough time to help Juve, who would lose their 3rd European final in 4 years. Once again, just to drive my point even further, take some inspiration from this. At this point, it was easier to argue that Conte was a serial loser. You just gotta learn with each mistake and come back stronger. These consecutive near misses just toughened Conte up and made him a more resilient leader than ever. With Del Piero and Zidane injured, Juventus went through a horror season that saw Lippi replaced with Ancelotti. With 21 titles across 5 countries, including 3 Champions Leagues, if Conte was ever the manager's most beloved player, this was it. With Ancelotti, Conte was always the first name on the team sheet. Quickly, Juventus were back on top of the Serie A. With 8 games to go, they led by 9 points, but then losses to Milan, of course Lazio, and finally Verona put Juve only 2 points in front with 1 match to go. I've heard this story a million times and only the characters change. This time, it was Juve and 13th place Perugia. The final score was a 1-0 defeat and Lazio took the title. Looking back on that day, Conte said, "I didn't sleep for 7 days, not a wink. We somehow lost a Scudetto that we had already won." It's interesting seeing how he dealt with defeat. It's like he had to go through every kind of heartbreak in order to become obsessive enough to know every way of avoiding it. It's kind of poetic, in a way. In another interview, he even said, "When you lose, you learn a lot about yourself. Winning is beautiful, but to win, you can only relax when you've really done it." That was the lesson he got from his time with Ancelotti, who left after another chaotic season with Juve climbing from 6th in the table to finishing just 2 points off the top. As Lippi took over the squad once again, oh boy, there was drama, and Conte, now 32, had a whole new cast of teammates like Buffon, Nedved and Trezeguet. With 5 matches to go, Juve was third with a 6-point gap to close down. By the last match day, Inter was at the top with a 1-point advantage to Juve and a 2-point advantage to Roma. Inter faced Lazio, but had already scored twice under 24 minutes. Juve and Roma easily beat their opponents regardless, but Inter would actually go on to lose 4-2, falling down to the 3rd place and allowing Juve to take the trophy. In just 2 years, the roles were reversed. Juve had beaten the odds to win the league in the last match day. As it seemed the end was coming for Conte's career, one last piece of heartbreak came as in his second to last season, Juve once again made the final of the Champions League, only to lose to an AC Milan team coached by none other than Carlo Ancelotti. Losing 4 big international finals at club level was already impressive, but it wasn't all that there was for Conte. Throughout the years, he also became a regular in the Italian national team. From the start, he was coached by none other than Arrigo Sacchi, a coach that in 4 years with Milan won 8 titles, including 2 Champions Leagues, just one more elite coach for Conte to learn from. Their first tournament together was as heartbreaking as any. Despite Conte not getting much playing time, Italy reached the final of the World Cup, losing to Brazil as Baggio missed from the penalty spot. After Cesare Maldini took over, Conte was not called up for the next World Cup, and eventually, in 2000, under the guidance of Dino Zoff, Conte would be back for the Euros. Once again they would make the final, though Conte would be left out, and after leading 1-0 for a while, France would tie the match in the last minute, and then get the golden goal to Trezeguet, leaving Italy as nothing but runners-up once again. With these 2 stories, we finish Conte's club career, an exciting yet depressing tale of 6 major international final defeats, 1 UEFA Cup, 3 Champions League finals, 1 at the World Cup, and another at the Euros. Looking back now, it seems Conte had to become a serial loser before he could ever become a serial winner. Just a little more than a year after retiring, Conte took over his first position as head coach at a second-tier club named Arezzo. Hilariously, it didn't go too well, and after 9 games without a win, he was sacked. Some manager who had been coaching teams in the 3rd and 4th divisions of Italian football took over, and after a few months, Arezzo realized that things were even worse, and so they sacked him as well, and called Conte back, who this time around nearly helped them avoid imminent relegation, with 19 points from 7 games not being enough. The thing is that nobody coach from the 4th division who took over the squad was named Maurizio Sarri, which is just hilarious. The twists and turns of life, huh? You never know what's gonna happen. Then Conte took over Bari, oddly enough replacing Giuseppe Materazzi, the dad of Marco Materazzi, taking over as the club were 16th in the table in December. By the following season, Conte had somehow already promoted them back to Serie A. This got him his first ever big job managing Atalanta in the first division, which was a disaster. They had finished mid-table, but once Conte took over, it was only a matter of time before they completely derailed, being second to last in the table, leading Conte to resign in January after he needed police protection from the Atalanta ultras who seemed desperate to get him out of the club at any cost. Regardless of the managerial change, Atalanta would still go on to be relegated. After a while he took over Siena, who had been relegated as well, as they finished right below Atalanta, and there, Conte impressed a lot, immediately earning them back promotion to the Serie A. And it was at this very moment that Conte's career as a manager changed forever. Juventus had finished in a miserable 7th place in the league, not even qualifying to the Europa League. And with the next fan-favorite player like Antonio Conte enjoying a pretty successful stint at Siena, they decided to take a chance on him. What followed was an incredible streak of 42 unbeaten matches, only losing on the last match of the season against Napoli in the final of the Coppa Italia. Conte was fast. He made the players know that 7th place wasn't acceptable at Juventus. He put everyone in their place and let them know exactly what he wanted from them, while also being open-minded enough to switch formation in order to fit the likes of Pirlo, Vidal, Marchisio, and eventually Pogba. But more impressively, he somehow managed to take a defense that had conceded 47 goals over the last season and get their tally down to only 20 this time around. The next season started with 14 matches without a defeat, finally losing a league game against Inter 2-1. They would finish the season with 8 defeats, 2 of them coming against eventual European champions Bayern Munich, which was also their only defeats by more than 1 goal over that season. Not as impressive, but still incredibly solid. In his 3rd year, Juventus were once again very good, except for the strange fact that they failed to qualify to the knockout stages of the Champions League, dropping down to Europa League instead, finishing 1 point below Galatasaray. They would eventually be knocked out in the semi-finals against Benfica, though they'd still take 2 trophies, the League and the Super Cup. By the end of this season, Conte decided to quit while on top, leaving the club he found in a desperate state, with 3 league titles in 3 years and 3 Manager of the Year awards. Soon after, he took on the role of national team coach, commanding Italy over the Euro 2016 campaign. His record was pretty good on his way to the tournament, only 3 defeats in 20 matches, all in friendlies against top nations like Portugal, Germany and Belgium. Once in the tournament, they did reasonably good, beating Spain 2-0 before falling to Germany on penalties in the quarterfinals. After the tournament, Conte decided to return to club football early, as he felt he missed the thrill and pace of a full season of football. He joined Chelsea, with who he had agreed on terms before the Euros. Before his appointment, Chelsea had finished the season in 10th place, with only 50 points and a goal difference of 6. That's fewer points than Stoke City and Southampton, and more goals conceded than West Bromwich. By the end of their first season, they were champions with 93 points, the 2nd highest points tally ever in the Premier League, only behind Mourinho's Chelsea. But in reality, the league season hadn't even started that well. 6 matches into it, Chelsea had lost 3-0 to Arsenal and dropped down to 8th place in the league. This loss prompted Conte to adopt a 3-4-3 formation that had proved effective back in Italy, and it revolutionized English football. The quality of their performances increased so drastically that by the 16th match day, Conte had the best record of any debut manager since 1998. At one point, Chelsea was conceding on average only around 2 shots on target per game, despite playing with a back 3. But of course, that back 3 was a facade. With N'Golo Kante and Nemanja Matic in midfield, their job was 10 times easier. This is easily noticeable by the fact that very often, in that back 3, 2 of the 3 players were fullbacks rather than centre-backs. With the league adjusting to their tactics and a disappointing transfer market, including the departure of Diego Costa in favor of Alvaro Morata, the departure of Matic and Cuadrado, and the signing of players like Bakayoko, Drinkwater, Giroud and Emerson Palmieri, Chelsea went back to poor form, getting only 70 points and only managing 62 goals in the league, finishing 5th place outside of the Champions League qualification spots. And just like that, Conte got the sack. Looking for the next damsel in distress, Conte found Inter after a season of absence. Under Spalletti, Inter had gone from finishing 7th to 2 consecutive 4th place finishes, but it was believed that Spalletti wouldn't be capable of pushing them any further. After all, they weren't willing to wait around any longer. It had been nearly 7 years since their last qualification to the Champions League. So, Conte took over. Despite being in 4th place with 30 matches played, a great end to the season saw Inter climb fast to the 2nd spot in the table, a single point of the title. For once, Conte had failed to perform a miracle and Juventus took home their 9th title in a row. But Conte had been excellent. The progress was there for everyone to see and Juventus was clearly weakened. Lukaku put out 23 goals and was a great goal-scoring threat, something that hadn't been available to them since Mauro Icardi in 2014. Christian Eriksen also had a major impact in the squad and was another signing which left a mark, especially when taking into account that Juve was also in the run for him. Barella, Godin and Alexis Sanchez made it all even more impressive. If the transfers picked out by Conte had been sort of tragic at Chelsea, now he was making some really good choices. Though some of the praise has to be handed to Marotta, who was an icon in the Italian transfer market and had joined from Juve at the same time as Conte. Still, the second season was equally impressive, with the arrivals of Hakimi, Perisic, Sensi and Nainggolan making the difference that Conte was looking for, finishing the season with a tally of 91 points, the second highest from any team except Juventus since the start of the 38-match era. After some confusion with one of Inter's main shareholders leaving the club, Conte ended up leaving on mutual consent. First, a quick note before we go on. I bet some of you have noticed that I have barely mentioned the Champions League since I started talking about his managerial career. The reason is that quite simply, despite his wild domestic success, Conte barely had any internationally, only making it out the group stage in 2 occasions, never going further than the quarterfinals. Given the strange way he has handled his career, it's hard to assess why this has happened. Maybe it's because he keeps taking over teams that haven't even qualified, maybe his tactics just don't have what it takes for the international level. Regardless, some say that because of this, he can't be considered a serial winner. I quite simply disagree. What other coach has taken 3 teams struggling that hard and instantly turned them into world-class formations with what seemed like the turn of a switch? I can't name another, so I guess it's your turn to try. Regardless, let's get back into it. As what seemed like another season of absence started, Nuno Espírito Santo was sacked by Tottenham and Conte took over. So far not much has happened. January will bring some transfers surely, I guess we'll see, but one thing is sure, this is the ultimate test for Conte. Tottenham have been one of the strongest sides in the Premier League for what seems like an eternity now. In 16-17, Pochettino nearly did it, finishing in second, 7 points of who else but Antonio Conte's Chelsea. If you disregard last season, 2009 was the last time Spurs failed to make it to the top 6, but they just don't seem capable of breaking through to the top. With managers like Tuchel, Klopp, Guardiola and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, where am I kidding, disregard that last one, Conte will have to do far more than just go against all odds. This is a strange case of when a miracle worker takes on a cursed squad. Now we will have to see whose seemingly magical powers are the strongest. So, what do you think? Is Conte a serial winner? Does he need a Champions League title in order to be one? Is he the man to break Tottenham's curse? I would love to hear your opinion. But regardless, that's it. This was kind of Conte's career in a video, and I haven't said this in a while, so I want to make sure to thank every single one of you for watching my channel. This is still an unbelievable journey, and I'm really so happy that all of you are here. And yeah, that's it. Thank you a lot, and I'll see you next week. Bye.